We know that the Parsha of the week always speaks to current events. It's incredible that what we're experiencing now, the third intifada, whatever you want to call it, is the Parsha of the week. Sarah says to Avram, Garesh Amazot es Benah. Drive out this slave girl and Abu Mamzer. Ki lo yirash ben Amazoisim Yitzchak, my son. So Rashi says, what does that mean? He's not willing to share the inheritance with my son Yitzchak. So Rashi says, what was the dispute about? Meirivim Yitzchak al Yerusha. Yishmael was fighting with Yitzchak on the Yerusha, who is going to inherit Eretz Yisrael. Yiddish? V'yotzim b'sadeh, v'notol kashto, v'yore boy chitzim. And Yishmael would shoot arrows at Yitzchak. And Rashi brings up Pasuk Mishta Hayore Zikim. He would shoot Zikim at him. What does Zikim mean, Rabbi Yaakov Golden? Zikim means fire bombs. So Rashi quotes a Pasuk in Mishlei, Hayore Zikim, that Yishmael, Abu Mamzer, would shoot Zikim, which means, fire bombs at Yitzchak. So it's current events in the Parsha. Nothing has changed in 3,700 years. They're still shooting Zikim at us, and it's a dispute over the Yerusha. They claim that Israel belongs to them, and we have no business here. Avram thought, can we all get along? We can share. But Sarah Imenu, she had a Bina Yeteda, she said, Garesh Amazos Minim Yitzchak, he's not willing to share. He wants it all. So Sarah knew better than what and Avraham Avinu, that no matter how much concessions you make, it's useless because they want it all, and they'll continue to shoot Zikim at us, David, today's headlines. So this is what Yishmael was terrorizing Yitzchak 3,700 years ago. Nothing has changed since then. And again, current events in the Parashah, there's an amazing Rashbam. Why did God inflict such anguish and agony, David, on Avram Avinu? For 3 days, he was walking, thinking that he has to what? Kill his own son. 3 days, right? Why did he deserve such anguish? So the Rashbam says something incredible, like ripped from today's headlines.
He made a peace deal
and that's right. It says, Vahi achar dvorim eileh. Was after these things that God tested Abraham, and he said, take your son and kill him. After what things? The Parsha right before that, Abraham made a peace treaty with Avimelech, the king of the PLO. He made a peace treaty with Avimelech, the king of the terrorists, to give him parts of Eretz Yisrael. So God said to Abraham, I promised the entire land of Israel to you and your children. What are you making a peace treaty and giving parts of the precious Eretz Yisrael to your deadly enemies? Therefore, take your son and kill him. So the Rashbam, writing in the 1000s, already says that when we make deals to give our precious land to our deadly enemies, it results in Akeida. What does Akeida conjure up, Dave? What is Akeida? Smoke, fire, and blood. That's Akeida. So unfortunately, we haven't learned from Abraham's mistake. So the agony of the Akeida, says the Rashbam, was caused by Abraham making a peace treaty. In those days, he wasn't called Abu Mamzer, he was called Avimelech, the king of the PLO, because Abraham made a treaty to give part of our precious land to Avimelech, the king of the Palestinians, as a punishment. God said, take your son and make him an Akeida. And Akeida is what, Rabbi Yaakov? Fire, blood, and smoke. That's what terrorism is. Fire and blood and smoke. Unfortunately, our leaders haven't learned from Avram's mistake that making concessions to our enemies and giving our precious land away only leads to Akeida. Burned alive, Nebuch, like so many of our terror victims, terrorized, burned alive. If only our fearless leaders would have studied the Pasha of the Akeida before they signed the terrible Oslo peace treaty, and how many thousands of Jews have been murdered and maimed since then.
Why did the rabbis authorize it?
I don't know. And the Bereshis Rabbah says something amazing. Bereshis Rabbah says that Abraham, to seal the peace treaty, gave the king of the PLO Sheva Kvosot. Why is the place called Beer Sheva? They swore, and also the well that Abraham gave Avimelech 7 sheep, Sheva Kvosot, as a sign of what? Of the peace treaty. Says the Bereshis Rabbah, because Abraham gave this terrorist a present, David, 7 sheep, therefore in the book of Shmuel, the Aron HaKodesh was captured by the Palestinians and remained 7 months in the hands of the Plishtim. The Palestinians captured the ark and it remained in their possession 7 months, says the Bereshis Rabbah, as an onesh, as a punishment, because in the Parsha, Abraham gave the king of the PLO 7 sheep as a sign of what? Of the peace treaty, to give away parts of the land of Israel. As a punishment, the holy precious ark was captured by the Palestinians and held hostage for how many months, David? 7 months, Keneged the Sheva Kvosot, that Abraham gave the king of the PLO. So you see, what goes around comes around. Maisa Avot Simin Labanim, positive and negative. Maisa Avot Simin Labanim works what? Both ways. What? Well, when did we get it back? What? David HaMelech couldn't go to war, right? Because Abraham made this peace treaty. He's amazing Medrash. Therefore, he couldn't conquer parts of the land of Israel because of this peace treaty that Avimelech and Abraham made. So therefore, there was a delay in conquering the land of Israel. So you see, what we do has eternal repercussions, or what, David? So we have to be very careful what we do. We're still paying for that mistake that Abraham made when he made the original Oslo peace treaty with Avimelech, the king of the Plishtim. We're still paying for that. So says the Rashbam, that it was what? It was a onesh, that God put him through such anguish and such agony for 3 days, thinking that he has to what? Kill his only son.
What made him think he could do it?
What?
What made him think he could
Now God said, Kach no, please take your one and only son and make him an olah. What does the word olah mean? Burn him up as a sacrifice. Kach no. So Rashi says, no, loshen bakasha. God pleaded with Abraham, vakasha mimcha. I plead with you, amod li bezu hanasayon. Please stand by me, here is David, by this test, and don't let me down. God pleads with Abraham, don't let me down. No is vavakasha. So David, if God knows the future, what do you have to plead with Abraham for? Didn't God know that Abraham's going to pass the test? Why did he have to plead with him, Rabbi Yaakov? Please don't let me down, Abraham. Pass this test, the hardest one. If God knows the future, his name, Yudke Vavke, Haya Hova V'yeh, why did God have to plead with him? He knows the outcome before it happens. So why plead with Abraham? Free will, but God knows how he's going to choose. So to make the question more difficult, after he passes the test, God says to him, Ki ata yadati, now I know, ki kim ata. Now I know that what? That you're a God-fearing man. What do you mean now I know? God knows the future. To him, David, past, present, and future is what? All one. So why did he have to plead with Abraham? And why does he say, now I know you're a God-fearing man? Yesterday I didn't know it? That's very difficult, right? We've been learning this since we're little kids, but it's very difficult. If God is all-knowing, and he is, then how does he have to plead with Abraham? Don't let me down. Don't fail me. And don't let me down, right? Don't get me started. And he says, Ki ata yadati. Now I know you're a God-fearing man, says God. He didn't know before. Right? So if you look in the Rambam Hilchos Tshuva, the Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva asked the question, how can we really have free will when God knows the future? How could I really choose when God knows how I'm going to choose before I make the choice? Right? I don't know, but he knows. So how could I act otherwise? Right? I'm standing outside of what? A Treifa restaurant. and I'm debating, should I go in or shouldn't I go in? I'm going to make up my mind, right? I smell the pork chops, whatever, and I'm debating, should I go in or not, right, David? So do I have free will? But God knows beforehand already whether I'll go in or not. So how do I really have free will to decide when he knows beforehand how I'm going to decide? It looks like the deck is stacked against me. This is the Rambam's question in Hilchas Tshuva. How free is my free will when he knows beforehand, Sonia, how I'm going to choose? So how could I choose otherwise? Whatever I do, he already knows it. So how free is my free will? So the Rambam in Hilchas Tshuva says that it looks like a paradox. The answer is beyond human comprehension. Somehow I do have free will, even though God knows how I'm going to choose. Beforehand, it does not interfere with my free will. These two doctrines seem to contradict, because if I have free will, how can I really, when he knows beforehand, I'll choose? So it looks like they contradict. The human mind is incapable of reconciling this contradiction, says Rambam in Hilchas Tshuva, but you still have free will, even though it looks impossible. So it looks like there's no answer to this question. But the Ralbag, one of the great Rishonim in the Kabbalists of the 1200s, he comes up with a beautiful answer to this question. And this will answer how God can plead with Abraham, don't let me down. He quotes the Kabbalah. How did God create the world? Tzimtzum. You know what Tzimtzum means? That God, Kaviyachol, limited himself, restricted himself. Why is it called outer space, Rabbi Yaakov? Give me space. In order for the world to come into being, God had to vacate space, because God is everywhere. He's everything. In order to create the universe, God had to Kaviyachol pull into himself, David. Like you see a gigantic water tank and you see an air bubble. Ever see that? So Kaviyachol, God had to create this space. Give me space. Outer space, in order for the world to exist. Otherwise the world couldn't exist, because God is everywhere. He is everything. So God, Kaviyachol, pulled into himself, restricted himself, created space, give me space, and that's how the world came into existence. God voluntarily did Tzimtzum. Says the Ralbag, how much God loves the human being, in order not to infringe and interfere with my free will, God also practices Tzimtzum, Nechama, when it comes to what? Bechira Chavshit. You hear what he's saying? God purposely limits himself, Kaviyachol, and doesn't look into a person's future in order that the person should have total free will. So therefore he pleads with Abraham, don't let me down. Please pass the test, because he voluntarily practiced Tzimtzum not to infringe one little iota of Abraham's what? Free will. And therefore God could say after he passed the test, bravo, now I know you're a great man. Didn't he know before? He could have known before, Sonia. But he did Tzimtzum. In order not to interfere with Abraham's our free will, God pulls back. He practices Tzimtzum not to interfere with my free will, and therefore, to allow free will to work absolutely, God practices Tzimtzum, and that's how the Psukim make sense, where he says, please take your son, please don't let me down, and now I know that you're a God-fearing man, because God knows everything, but voluntarily, Kaviyachol, God loves man so much that he limits his knowledge of our free choice, not to what? Infringe on our free choice, to give us total, absolute free choice. So this answers the question. Now Abraham thinks he's going to kill his kid, right? He says to the people waiting, he says to them what? We're going to go up the mountain, and we're going to return to you. But he should have said, I'll come to you. Right? I mean, he's going, with his mind, he's going to kill his son. Right? So he should have said what? I will come back. Has been a shuvah? So, Rabbi Yaakov, what do you think? It's a cover-up. Because he's going to say, I'm going to kill my son. They're going to call the men in the white coats. Right? Do you think so? called the men in the white coats, right? So therefore Avram covers up, and he says, V'neshuva aleichem, as a ruse, that they shouldn't think, where you taking Yitzchak? Where you taking, not coming back with him? So he says, V'neshuva aleichem. Rashi says, and makes another comment. Rashi says, V'neshuva aleichem, that what? He prophesies without realizing what he said. Nitnabe shishuvu sheneyem. He prophesies that they're both going to return. So if he knew it, it's only a game, then what kind of test is it? Obviously in his mind, he's what? He thinks he's going to kill his son. So when you said v'neshuvah, he prophesied subconsciously. But what's the message for us, David? The Torah is not a history book. The Torah only writes what I need to know for the year 2014. What do I need to know? He said, we will come back, even though in his own mind he thinks Yitzchak is not coming back. What's the message for us? So the Gemara Bracha says, the message for us is, Afila cherev al tzavoro shel Adam, al yityayesh min harachamim. Even when it looks hopeless, never give up hope. So in Abraham's mind, he's going to kill his son, yes. But a Jew is the eternal optimist. You hear? Never give up hope, hoping against hope, even though in his own mind he thought he was going to kill his son, but he's hoping against hope that something's going to happen, he wouldn't have to do it. And the message for us is, no matter how hopeless the situation looks, like today, the third intifada, a Jew always has to be an optimist and do what he can to protect himself and not to take any chances, right? So therefore he says what? V'noshuva. Now God tells him, Kachna es bincha, v'lech lecha el Eretz HaMaria, v'lech lecha el Eretz HaMaria, and go for yourself to Mount Moriah. Where's Mount Moriah? Temple Mount. You think Abraham up, hope he's not praying up there, because the Waf wouldn't like it. What do you think? You think he prayed up there? Mount Moriah, that's Har HaBayit. That's the future place of the Beit HaMikdash. That's why Abraham took what? Yitzchak up. The Muslims say it wasn't Yitzchak, it was Yishmael. You look in the Quran, they believe that who was on the Akeida? Abu Mamzer. I mean Yishmael. So, but we know that it was Yitzchak. And I hope Yitzchak wasn't praying either, or else the Waf would arrest him too, right? So why is Temple Mount called Mount Moriah? There's a pasuk in Divrei Yomim, Livnot et Beit Hashem b'Yerushalayim b'Har HaMoriah. King Solomon built the house of God in Jerusalem on Mount Moriah. Why is Temple Mount called Mount Moriah? So Rashi brings two explanations. Beautiful. Hashem shem misham hara yotzal Yisrael. The Bezdin Hagadol sat on the Temple Mount, the Sanhedrin. They sat on the Temple Mount and they gave instructions to Klal Yisrael. So Mount Moriah means the mountain of teaching, the mountain of instruction. To the nation of Israel came forth teaching halacha, psak halacha, the mountain of instruction, because the Bezdin Hagadol, the Sanhedrin, sat on the Temple Mount and they decided halacha. So that's one explanation, David. Mountain of instruction, of teaching. Unkala says Mount Moriah from the word more. Twice a day the Kohanim burned incense on the Temple Mount in the Beis HaMikdash. 11 herbs and spices. That's where the KFC got it, 11 herbs and spices. The incense was 11 herbs and spices, but the Talmud says that the most powerful of the 11, the sweetest and the strongest of the 11 was myrrh. Myrrh. So it's Mount Moriah, the mountain of perfume. And the Talmud says in Tractate Yuma, if you lived in Jerusalem 2,000 years ago, Rabbi Yaakov, you never had to buy your wife Chanel No. 5. Or you never had to buy Right Guard deodorant. Save a lot of money, right? Because the entire city was, what's the word, David? Permeated with this heavy smell of the myrrh, of the delicious smell that covered the whole city from the incense burning twice a day. So Mount Moriah, the mountain of sweet perfume. Okay? Now, you haven't seen the latest headlines. On Friday, I read in the Post that Abu Mamzer is very upset with international media that they keep referring to Temple Mount. He says there's no such thing as Temple Mount. It's the Al-Aqsa compound. So Abu Mamzer has graduated. He wrote his PhD on Holocaust denial. And now he graduated. Now he's not just denying the Holocaust, he's denying that there ever was a Jewish temple on Temple Mount. So therefore the media shouldn't use the word Temple Mount, because no such thing. It's the Al-Aqsa compound. So this is Yishmael, the attitude that replace us, replacement theology. This is what it's all about, that hatred, that jealousy of Yishmael Keneged Yitzchak, the Zikim, that Yishmael shot against Yitzchak 3,700 years ago. The same word, David, is being used today, Zikim, where they attack us with fire bombs and
They love knives.
They love knives and they love Molotov cocktails. I live in Pisgat Zev, so we're showered at night with fire bombs, with Zikim. And the police are under orders not interfere. Let them do. Let them vent, I think it's called. Let them vent. What a sick government we have. What a sick government we have, that the border police, they have to let themselves be attacked and they have no right to retaliate. There's a shocking video. You go to Oretz Sheva in Shuafat. There was one soldier in a pillbox, and the pillbox is on fire. You go to Oretz Sheva, and he's begging for help. And the soldiers have orders from up not to interfere. They have to vent and throw their zikim. It's a miracle that this soldier in the pillbox was not burned alive in Shuafat. That's right next to Pisgat Zev. The soldiers, their hands are tied. They are the Akeida. How the government, I don't know what's with them, they don't allow the soldiers, the police, to do the job that has to be done. The government, what? Their hands are tied, unfortunately. Unfortunately, right?
The same way they worked in the name Palestinians, is they're working
Right.
now the Al-Aqsa.
Right. There's one pasuk in the Torah that the government does lehidur. You know, the government's not so religious. There's a pasuk in the Torah, v'yitim mishuga, memare yanayim. V'yitim mishuga. Deuteronomy 28, that one of the curses of the persecution, that will be insane. So this pasuk, David, the government does with all the hidurim. V'yitim mishuga. They don't allow the police and the soldiers to defend themselves, not alone defend us. They don't allow the soldiers and the police to defend themselves. They have to be sitting ducks. So the V'yitim mishuga, that pasuk in Deuteronomy 28 is literally coming true, unfortunately. V'yitim mishuga mimare enecha. It's a pasuk in Devarim Perek Chav Ches, one of the terrible klalot, that from all of the tzaras we will become mishuga. So that's exactly what's happening, unfortunately. At least that pasuk in the Torah, the government is, they're doing that pasuk with all the hidurim, right? Right? It's a pash in Kitavo, the Vorim Chav Ches. V'yitim mishuga mimare enecha. Unfortunately. What?
Do you think that some people might be right to call this behavior on the part of the
What's it called? Self-destructive behavior? Death wish.
that of Erev Rav?
Or the Erev Rav, right? Or they're terrified of John Balkari. Right? When we defend ourselves, we get condemned, right? Right? This Arab-American teenager was throwing fire bombs at the police 2 weeks ago, and the police shot him. So the State Department sent condolences to the parents of the terrorist, and they want a full-scale investigation of why we shot this Arab teenager throwing fire bombs at the Israeli police. Right? Condolences to the family of the terrorist, and a full-scale investigation is demanded of the Netanyahu government why we shot this poor terrorist. Just because he wants to throw zikim at the Israeli police, that's his right. We're not supposed to defend ourselves. What?
Netanyahu just apologized to the EU and Jordan.
For?
He promises no more Jews will go up and pray at the temple.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Where's freedom of religion? Where's freedom of religion for everybody else except the Jewish people, right?
That's what freedom is.
Freedom of religion, yeah. We're wimps. We need Naftali Bennett, we need, right?
Naftali Bennett is good.
He's a good guy. I think he'll win the next election. No?
be better than Moshe
Oh, no, but anyway, right? Let's move on now. So who stops Abraham? God sends him to the Akeida. Vayikhu elav malach Hashem min hashemayim. So the question is, why did God send the malach? Right?
God didn't send them out.
So Rav Kook says that the Malach was Abraham's conscience telling him that it's impossible that Hashem meant to kill his son. The Malach is the conscience of Avraham Avinu, the inner conscience, that Avram, you must have misunderstood God. That's why Rav Kook says the word Malach. God never said Shachteu, God said Haleu. God only said what? Bring him up. I never tell you to shecht him. Rashi quotes the Medrash. I only wanted to bring him up. Once you bring him up, take him down. So the Malach was Abraham's conscience telling him that you misunderstood the divine command to kill Yitzchak. That was only a test. But another interpretation, David, like you said, we know machshava tova kadosh baruch hu mitzav l'maisa. We know if you want to do a mitzvah and you're prevented from doing it by circumstance beyond your control, in God's eyes it's a done deal. Avram Yitzchak wanted to do the Akeida. It's not that God sent the malach. The Mishnah says when you do a mitzvah, you create a malach. It is Rav Yaakov. You do a mitzvah, you create a malach. How does the Mishnah know that? The Mishnah in Perik Dalet, the Masechta Avot, if you do a mitzvah, you create a malach. How does the Mishnah know that? Oh, here. The malach was created by the act of the Akedah. It's not that God sent the malach, but when Abraham did the Akedah, the mitzvah was complete, because machshava tova Hashem mitzav lamasa, so therefore the malach was created. It's not that Abraham sent him. And therefore, afterwards he takes a ram and sacrifices instead of a son. It says, Vayikra malach al Avraham shenit. Why another malach? To have a good union, you can't do two jobs, right? No, once he did the ram, Rabbi Yaakov, he did another mitzvah. Another mitzvah, another malach. So therefore, Yikra, after he burned up the ram on the Akedah, Vayikra malach al Avraham shenit. What does shenit mean? A second malach. Why? Good union, right? No. Every time you do a mitzvah, you create another malach. That's how the Mishnah and the Avot knows. When you do a mitzvah, you create a malach. At the end of the Akedah, it says, Vayoshav Avraham el Na'arav, Veikumu Yelchu Yachtav. Avraham returns to the two guys waiting at the foot of the mountain. Avraham returns, and they went Yachtav back to Beersheba. Didn't we forget somebody? Where's the star of the show, right, Rivka? Vayoshav Avraham el Na'arav. Didn't we forget the main actor? Buddy, what happened to Yitzchak Avinu? Isn't he the star? We forgot him. Only Avram returns to the guys waiting at the foot of the mountain. Where is Yitzchak? You my question, Bianca. What happened to him? What? Where? The Lakewood? Where did he go? Shem Ve'aver. It doesn't say it in the text. Why doesn't Yitzchak return with his dad? Some say he was upset with him. You wanted to kill me. I'm out of here. He ran away from home. It's very, it's very strange. What happened to Yitzchak here? Huh? Vayoshav Rama Na'arav. Where is Yitzchak? So one shot is, remember we said, Machshava Tova Kadosh Baruch Hu Mitzav L'maisa. How does the Gemara know that if you want to do a mitzvah with all of your might, and you're prevented from doing it by circumstance beyond your control, in God's eyes it's what? Done. How do you know that? From here. Since Yitzchak wanted to become a Karban Olah, in God's eyes it's like he got burned up. So therefore, it doesn't say he returned. Obviously, he returned. He got married. He had twins, right? Dead people don't get married and have twins. But since he wanted to become an Ola Tamima, in God's eyes, it's like what? He became. How do I know that? Doesn't say he returned. Even though physically he returned. But Hashem made believe he didn't return. Because Machshava Tova, Kadosh Baruch Hu Mitzarev L'Maseh. And Rashi says, amazing, after the Akedah, Rashi says, Efroi shel Yitzchak tzabur v'omed lekapara. The ashes of Yitzchak are heaped up and they are kapara for us. What kind of ashes of Yitzchak? Rashi says, Yitzchak's ashes are heaped up on Temple Mount, David, and they are for us a kapara. That's what Rashi says. What kind of ashes? Yitzchak never became ashes. Did he? Or didn't he? Since he wanted to become ashes, in God's eyes it's a done deal. And therefore, it doesn't say that he returned. So, machshava tova, kadosh baruch hu mitzav l'maisa. If you want to do a mitzvah, like what? if you sit like this, you say, I want to do a mitzvah, doesn't mean anything. If you make an effort to do a mitzvah, and you're prevented by doing it by circumstance beyond your control, in God's eyes, it's a done deal. And therefore, it doesn't say that what? That Yitzchak returned. It says, after the Akeida, Vayoshev Avraham on the Arav, Vayelchu Yachdav el Beer Sheva. The two attendants are waiting at the foot of the mountain, and Avraham and Yitzchak go back Yachdav. What does Yachdav mean? They took the same Sherut, right? They took the same Eget bus back to Beersheba. Why is that important? You'll take the high road, I'll take the low road. The Torah is not a history book. Why do I need to know that after the Akedah, Avraham and Yitzchak went together with the attendants back to Beersheba? They all fit in the one national taxi service. Thank you very much. What's the message? Huh? So Hirsch says something incredible. Shimshon Full Hirsch says something amazing. Avraham and Yitzchak have now gone through the zenith that a human being can reach, the height of Kiddusha and Nevuah. They passed this awesome test, buddy. Right? They're greater than angels. They're coming down the mountain. Who's waiting for them? Servants. So you might think that what? They treated them with disrespect. You know who I am? Who are you? You guys can't hold a candle to me, right? Get away. Move aside. Vayelchu Yachdav, despite passing such an awesome test, Avraham Yitzchak, despite being the holiest of the holy, they felt they're no better than the servants. Vayelchu Yachdav. They didn't say sit in the back of the bus. They treated the servants with full equality, not lording it over them, not acting any arrogant over them. And that's a great praise for Avraham and Yitzchak, that despite their awesome spiritual superiority, they didn't treat the servants with what? With contempt, with disdain. Vayelchu Yachdav. That's a sign of a great person, that even though you're superior, morally superior, and spiritually superior, you're way above the rest of the people, you don't act like what? Like they are nothing, even though compared to you they are. That's the point, the great humility of what? Of Avraham and Yitzchak. Vayelchu Yachdav. Now, Vayishma Lakim el Kol Hanar Ba'ashehu Sham. God heard the voice of the lad. Yishmael was dying of thirst, right? Just amazing how current events. And the Medrash quotes the Malachim. They said, God, let him die, because his grandchildren will terrorize your children. Bus bombings, running us over in the light station there, whatever. Let him die. So God says, Ba'ashehu Sham. I only judge a person what he is now. I don't look to the future. Vayishma lahim et kol hanar ba'ashehu sham. So God spared him, because Yishmael now was not a terrorist, even though later on his kids will be. So therefore God spared him. It says Vayishma lahim et kol hanar. What's a lahim, buddy? That's midas adin. It should have said Vayishma Hashem. No, shouldn't have said Vayishma Hashem et kol hanar. If God is sparing him, Elokim is midas adin, a strict justice. It should have said Vayishma Hashem et kol hanar. How come it says Elokim? Because midas harachamim would not have spared him, buddy. Midas harachamim looks at the whole picture. Midas harachamim considers what's going to be later with him. Later, his kids will be terrorizing us. Midas harachamim would have said, let him die. It's dafke, 1 second, Elokim, midas adin. Midas adin doesn't look at future events, because a dayan can only judge what he sees now. He cannot figure in any extenuating circumstances. So therefore, Elokim spared him. Rachamim would have said, let him die. Beautiful, David. That's why we read this parsha on Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is all about din, the Melech HaMishpat. So all year long we're not Beseder. So why should God give us a good judgment? Because he only looks Ba'ashehu Sham. That's exactly why we read this on Rosh Hashanah.
It's because if that low life did tshuva, then we Jews could do.
That a judge can only judge what he sees now, not what was before and what not later. So ironic that this is the Pasha we read on Rosh Hashanah, which is all about din, strict justice. And therefore God spared Yishmael. Rachamim would have said, let him die. And Rosh Hashanah, ironically, this helps us. Because even though we're not Beseder the rest of the year, on Rosh Hashanah we are Beseder. We're doing tshuva, we're crying, we're blowing shofar. That's all the judge can do, and God follows his own Torah. A dayan, a judge, can only judge achshav, and not what he was or will be. And therefore we read this dafka on when? Rosh Hashanah. That's Yom Adin. Yom Kippur is Yom HaRachamim. Rachamim looks at the whole picture. But Rosh Hashanah, Din, they have Ayishba Lakim, and that's why Yishmael was what? Saved. To our detriment, he was saved. Yes? Go ahead. 1 second, Rivka has a question. What? The judge, that's a halacha. That has nothing to do with it. That's a promise. But why was he spared? Why was he spared? When he'll be a Rasha later.
Instead of getting a sentence, he gets something good.
He gets, that's a promise that God made to Avraham Avinu, the schus of Avraham Avinu. But if he was guilty now, Taka, he would have died now. But now he's not guilty.
Question. He is guilty now.
He's not guilty now. Now he's not terrorizing anybody. He's dying of thirst now. He's not terrorizing anybody now.
Second, the reason
Go ahead.
why he was banished
Okay.
because he's like a Ben Sorel.
He was Metzachek. But now that's the whole point, Rabbi Aaron. You're enforcing my point. He was a Metzachek. That's why he got kicked out. But now, Nechama, is he terrorizing anybody? No. Now he's lying incapacitated, dying of thirst. That's all God looks at. Not what he was before, even though he was a Metzachek before, right? He was terrorizing Yitzchak. But now he's not terrorizing anybody. So a Dayan, Midas Adin, can only judge a person what he's now. Not what he was and not what he will be. Very ironic. Midas HaRachman looks at the whole picture. Midas HaRachman has said, let him die. He was a Rasha before, be a Rasha later. But Elokim is Midas Adin, only judges a person what? Ba'asha Husham, and therefore he what?
So you're limiting the time to the very moment.
That's exactly what a Dayan. Look at Tractate Sanhedrin. A Dayan who judges a defendant can only judge what's now, not what was and not what will be. Avraham Avinu practices Eshel. Achila Shtiya Leviyah, the great mitzvah Chnosas Orchim, right? Consists of Eshel. What does Eshel mean? Achila Shtiya Leviyah. Leviyah.
What's Leviyah?
Leviyah means escort service. Escort. Get it? You didn't know that? Good thing you came today. Levaya. Levaya is for a dead person. For a live person, say Leviyah. It's the same root, but we don't want to say a dead guy and a live guy. For a dead person, say Levaya. For a living person, Leviyah. How do we know that? After Abraham fed them, it says, when he thought that they're strangers, it says, Avram holech imam l'shalcham. Avram went with them l'shalcham. Says Rashi, lalvotam. What does lalvotam mean? To escort them. Because he thought they're orchim. He had no idea that they're malachim. So Torah goes out of its way, Rivka, to say that after he gave them a good meal, he went l'shalcham lalvotam. So of the three parts of Achnosas Orchim, which you think are the most important? I would say Achila v'Shtiya, right? You're right, Rivka, but why? The Rambam says of the three parts of Achnosas Orchim, the most important part is the escort. I'll take the steak and wine over the escort, no? You got a nice steak, you got a nice wine. No, the most important part of the mitzvah, David, is what? Leviyah. If you don't have Leviyah, you're left with Eish. Achila Shtiya, David, stands for what? Light my fire. You have to add the Lamed, the Leviyah. Why is that most important, buddy? Why?
Because we see if you...
That they're leaving.
Or good riddance. No? Good riddance?
What happened was when we see
What?
When someone was not properly escorted from the city,
Right.
and he died.
Egla Rufa. Good. So it somehow gives the person good karma, right? Good karma, right? It gives him a halo of protection. But the Rambam gives another explanation. You said, okay, you give a guy a meal. Let's say you give him Chinese food. 12 minutes later, he's hungry again. Chinese food, right? Maybe 20 minutes later. So, right? You give him a nice drink, he's thirsty again. The hana is temporary. It wears off. But when you escort the person, says Rambam, you're giving covet to his neshama. That hana is not like a Chinese meal. That hana keeps on going and going and going. You give covet. King David calls what? You escort him to a Chinese restaurant. No, an escort, says Rambam, is kavod the neshama. The neshama gets a farganigin that you're escorting me out. It's not a physical hana, but that wears off, Sonia. An escort is hana for the neshama. It's kavod. Can you put your finger on kavod? The neshama, King David calls the neshama kavod. It's kavod for the kavod. King David calls the human soul kavod. David, why? Because the tafkid of the human soul is to give kavod to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the human soul in Tehillim is called in a few places kavod. So when you escort the person, you're giving kavod to the kavod. That hanod is not temporary, it's what? It's permanent. It remains part of the neshama forever, and therefore the Rambam says the most important part of the mitzvah is to escort. People don't know. You give a guy a nice meal, you have to escort him out the front door at least 10 feet, minimum, outside, right, down the steps. And that is the greatest part of the mitzvah, because that's giving cover to his neshama, and that is a permanent hana, unlike the food and drink, which is only temporary, which wears off. Now, great question that we have to ask. When God tells Avram he wants to destroy Sodom, Avraham pleads, how dare you want to kill the tzaddik and the rasha? Chalilalach, shall the judge of the entire earth not do justice? So when God tells him I want to destroy Sodom, he pleads and he puts up an argument, how dare you kill a tzaddik and a rasha? A little bit later when God says I want to destroy your own son, he doesn't say boo. Very bizarre, wouldn't you say? You're pleading for the low-life sodomites. How dare you kill a tzaddik and a rasha? Who's a bigger tzaddik than your own son Yitzchak? He's not a tzaddik. This argument that he makes, how dare you want to kill the tzaddik and the rasha? That argument you should have made not for the low-life sodomites, but what? Who's a bigger tzaddik than Yitzchak? Rabbi Yaakov, very, very difficult question here. Theological question. Why he doesn't defend his own son, but he defends the low-life sodomites. What's it all about? What's the message for us, actually, over here? Then what kind of test? If it's only a game, then what kind of test is it? That if he knew the end, then it's not a test. This is only a test. In his mind, he thought he's going to kill his own son. Why not plead for his life, David, as he pleaded for the life of what? Of the low-life sodomites. It's a very strong question. I have an answer. You can take it or leave it. This is my own answer. God comes to Abraham and he says, I want to destroy Sodom. So Abraham is thinking, why are you telling me? You need my permission? You want to destroy Sodom? Go right ahead. Why are you telling me? It's not up to me. So Abraham's thinking, if you're telling me, obviously you want my input. Otherwise, why tell me? I'll tell you. I think it's not right. Why is he telling him for? He doesn't need Abraham's permission. Obviously, he wants Abraham's opinion. No? I'll give you my opinion. I don't think it's right. But by Yitzchak, he wasn't asking for an opinion. He gave him a direct command. Take your son and kill him. I'm not asking for your input. If the King of Kings gives you a direct command, or even a human king gives you a direct command, I'm not interested in your opinion. So how could he say anything? You hear my answer, David? I think the kash is better than the teretz, but it's the only answer I have. By Sodom, why is he telling him? It doesn't affect him. Right, you like the teretz? Okay, thank you. That's my answer, okay? Take it or leave. I think it's a good answer, because I don't know of another one, Rivka. Right? It's a good answer, right? What are you telling me for? It doesn't affect me. You want to nuke him? Go right ahead. You're telling me you want my opinion. Otherwise, why tell me? Here, by Yitzchak, I'm not consulting you like Sodom. I'm giving you a direct command. If the king gives you a direct command, there's nothing to debate about. And therefore, he could not say anything. Okay? Yes? What?
Didn't God know there was no tzaddik in Sodom?
No, tell me. So what's he saying? Beautiful, Rivka. God says, if I find, didn't God know there's no 10, 20, 30 tzaddikim there? What is it, a charade? And God says to him as follows. God says what? If I find in Sodom 50 tzaddikim, I will forgive the whole place. How could God say if? Doesn't he know for sure? Rav Avraham, I gave you the answer at the beginning of the shir. Now, Rav Pam, my Rebbe would say, once you have a great chidush, you can plug it in many places. How could God say, in Bereshis 18, verse 26, God says to Abraham, if I find 50 righteous people in the city, I will forgive the whole city for their sake. How could God say if? Doesn't he know for sure?
Free will.
Beautiful. I gave you the key. Plug it in. God purposely does tzimtzum. The human being should have total, unlimited free will. God says, I don't want to look what they're going to choose. Otherwise, how could they really choose 100%? So David, therefore, God can say what? If I find 50 people, tzadikim, only then will I forgive the whole city. Because God does tzimtzum, not to, what's the word, impinge? Thank you. I'm forgetting English. Impinge on my total, absolute free will. God doesn't look into a person's bechira chavshis, not to limit him, and therefore, buddy, God can taka say, Sodom chamishim tzadikim, right?
Ask the question, why would
This fits beautifully. One more. Look by the burning bush. Exodus 4. God tells Moshe, the Jews will believe your message. That you are the Redeemer. God reassures him that the Jews will what? Believe you. Right after that, Moses says they won't believe me. God just told you that the Yidden will believe you. How do you say they what? They won't. So you're learning this since you're a kid, right, Rabbi Yaakov? So this is the answer. How could you say they will believe God? You do tzimtzum. I know they won't believe. You don't look into the future. Otherwise, how could Moses contradict God? God says they will believe. And Moses says they won't. God, that's not your business. We have free will. You don't look into the future. How could you say they will believe? You see, once you have this chidush in your pocket, you can plug it in. Otherwise, it's very hard how Moses can contradict God. God, look in Exodus 4 by the burning bush. God says the Jews will believe you, Moses. He says, no, they won't. Say what? Arguing with the boss. So you have this chidush of the Ralbag. It's so beautiful, Sharona. You can plug it in many different places. What?
It's a steer here.
Why?
Because God is telling him that they will.
But that's the whole point. God can tell him that. Because hakol b'dei shemayim chutz miyirat shemayim. Everything is in the hands of God except the fear of God. So God, you can't say they will believe. That's going against the rules that you set up. So therefore, Moses had a right to argue with him. I know they won't believe. I know them.
But he's punished for that.
Is he punished? You're right. He's punished later for that. You're right. He's punished later. But he doesn't get fired. He doesn't get fired, right? He gets a 40-year extension on his contract, right? He gets 40-year extension on the contract, right?
You said when Avram, I like your text, when you said Avram was, he was asked, he was given, offered his, he was offered.
My teretz, take it or leave it.
So he offered his opinion. My question is, my problem was,
Yeah.
why would Abraham, why would he defend the people of Sodom?
Oh.
So
Why you defend these
So I
lowlifes?
think I came up with a teretz.
Go ahead.
The teretz is, this is the difference between Abraham and Noah.
Go ahead.
Noah wouldn't have said a word.
Right.
But Abraham is standing up for them, even though he knows they deserve to get
Right.
destroyed.
But Rashi explained he wasn't saying let the lowlifes off the hook. No, Sonia, look at Rashi. Give them Ebola, give them VD. But don't destroy the tzaddikim also. Punish them, give them what? AIDS or whatever, what's it called, Ebola. He wasn't saying that the Rishoyim should get off the hook. No. Give them Ebola, but spare the tzaddikim. He wasn't defending the Rishonim. Look at Rashi. We make a mistake. What is the free for all, buddy? Hefgewelt. No. Let them die in their beds, right? Or in a skiing accident, but don't destroy the whole city. There are many innocent people there, he thought.
But that's what happens with
So that's what he said. Don't do what you did in the flood. The flood, millions of babies were destroyed, right? Don't do it again, God. Don't do it again.
What does it say by
Thank you very much.